All right, what's going on, everybody? I'm Faraz. I'm here with Zach. We're gonna go over our wide receiver rankings, our tight end rankings. We started a little bit late today. I apologize. Uh, I woke up. Well, I had a rough night. First of all, I got two sick kids. Both my daughters not feeling well today. Both of them are home from school. Had a really rough night with one of them. She just couldn't sleep all night. She was sick, and I had to kind of handle that and deal with her. I'm that type of dad where like when anything goes wrong, when it comes to like the kids being sick, I'm so hands on. I don't know what it is, man. I think maybe the way that my mom was, I have no clue. I have no, but when it comes to that stuff, everything goes out of the window. I'm even worse than my wife, than their mom. Like I'm just like on it. I'm like, all right, this is what they're gonna eat the rest of the day. This is what they're gonna, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm just all about
Yeah.
it. But it is what it is. So, the morning was kind of crazy, but we're here now because we have to get through these wide receiver rankings, these tight end rankings to make sure that you guys are good to go going into tonight's game, going into the weekend. But first, real quick, Zach, just about tonight's game, it looks like Kenneth Walker is going to play.
Yeah.
And, this is a tough matchup. He's coming off the injury. They're listing him as questionable despite him, being listed as a full participant in practice 2 days in a row. How are you dealing with this Kenneth Walker situation? I think we had him ranked around like the RB 20-ish
Right.
in yesterday's show. How are you dealing with this, man? Are you actively looking for a replacement if you have Kenneth Walker?
I'm not. And it might be tempting because it is the 49ers, but the Seahawks offense is pretty good. And like you said, he's a full participant. I'd be worried more if he was limited or there was some other type of designation during the week. But if he was a full participant in practice, I'm not worried about it at all. We know what kind of talent he is. He's not just going to, completely leave you hanging, I don't think. If they have Kenneth Walker in the backfield, they should get back to running the ball a little bit more, especially with the game Geno Smith had last week. It's a primetime game, and these are two teams competing for playoff seeding. So I think the Seahawks definitely have. I think there's more on the line for the Seahawks tonight than the Niners, but I think that Seahawks can keep it close. It is still Brock Purdy at the end of the day. I mean, the Buccaneers offense isn't much of a measuring stick to see if the 49ers offense with Brock Purdy at the helm can keep pace with the team. So I think this is going to be more of a measuring stick for the 49ers in terms of that. And I think that the Seahawks will be able to put up some points, even though the 49ers defense is good. I think Kenneth Walker is going to be a big reason why they would if they do end up putting up a lot of points. Because last week, like we saw, Geno Smith was all right. He threw the touchdowns, but he did have a couple picks. I think they're going to have a lot of help in the form of Kenneth Walker. And like I said, we know the type of talent he is. So I'm not worried about him. If you have him, start him. The matchup isn't great, but I'm treating him just like any other stud running back. You don't sit your studs. It doesn't matter what the matchup is. I think he's going to be fine.
So do you think that his ranking of RB 20 that we had him at is too low at this point? Now,
I don't think it's.
here are the guys. Let me just talk about the guys that we had ahead of him.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm starting at like 14. So we had James Conner, Isaiah Pacheco, Raheem Mostert, assuming it looks like Jeff Wilson might end up playing. Right.
Yeah.
And we might want to
So
move Raheem Mostert down, I would say.
He's a little up in the air. So we'll kind of like nix him from this
Yeah,
discussion.
let's see. Actually, let me take a quick look on Jeff Wilson's practice status. He did not practice on Wednesday, and that's all we know for now. So we don't know yet. So I'll leave that as is.
We might get reports rolling in because we're a little bit later today, so we might get
Yeah,
some
that's
reports
true.
on
That's
the
true.
show.
And then we have Travis Etienne at 17, Zonovan Knight at 18, David Montgomery at 19, and then Kenneth Walker at 20, followed by Alvin Kamara, Najee Harris, Jamal Williams, Brian Robinson, Deontay Foreman. Like, if you have Brian Robinson, right? If you have Deontay Foreman, if you have Damian Harris, we don't know if Ramondre is going to be out or not. We would assume he is. But let's say you have Brian Robinson. Like, are you tempted to play him over Kenneth Walker?
It might be easy, like I said, because of the matchup. I think that Kenneth Walker, having him ranked at 20, is conservative. I think he can outperform that pretty easily. But we'll have to see how it goes, obviously. If you're thinking about starting Brian Robinson, I would frame it up this way. We know Brian Robinson's going to get the workload, but he's not on as good of an offense. He's not really a guarantee to score a touchdown. So I think that limits his upside a little bit. He'll get the work on the ground. I think he's good for about 80 yards a week because they're handing it to him 18, 19 times a game. And he's been all right in the efficiency department the past few weeks where he wasn't, earlier in the season. But I think Kenneth Walker, he could house one anytime. That's the type of talent he is. And if you want upside in the first week of playoffs, I know it's Thursday. I know it's tempting. You don't want to start the week off on the wrong foot, but I would start Kenneth Walker tonight over Brian
Okay.
Robinson if you have him.
Perfect. I love it. And I agree with you. I think the upside is still going to be there. It could take any play for him to house one, right?
Yeah.
He's that type of talent. So I'm not going to overthink it. I don't want to just straight up bench him because he did get those full practices in. So I think your analysis is spot on that one.
Right.
So
are you going to feel
yeah.
better? Are you going to feel worse if you start Kenneth Walker and he does poorly? Or are you going to feel worse if you don't start him and he has a big game? Especially first thing off the bat in the playoffs.
latter.
Yeah.
The latter,
obviously.
for sure.
So definitely just start Kenneth Walker tonight, guys.
I mean, there are safer options. Like, if you're looking for safety, like he's not like the safe option, right? So like if you have, Brian Robinson, maybe like Deontay Foreman, maybe a little bit safer, but like not that much safer, like Rachaad White in a full PPR league. Like, again, we keep talking about this 10 to 15 PPR points. If that's what you want, Rachaad White's probably good for that. Same thing with Fournette. So yeah. So, you know what I'm saying? So that's really what it comes down to. But I do think Kenneth Walker still has upside despite the matchup.
Right.
Now, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, we're going to talk about them in this episode in the rankings. So we'll leave that for a little bit later. Let's see.
We know we're starting Christian McCaffrey, but what do you think of
Christian
Brock
McCaffrey
Purdy
on the other side? I'm not considering him in a one quarterback league. I got some questions around him, and I know that he's a little bit tempting, but just we got to remember that he did run one in last week, so that's going to boost that fantasy score by a lot. So, and we can't say that he's going to run one in like every week, and he didn't throw for that many yards. Like, he played well, solid game manager type of role, and I don't think that's going to be fantasy conducive, especially in the Seahawks aren't that bad of a defense when it comes to the passing game. So no Deebo Samuel, doesn't have as much help. He can get it done. He can throw 2 touchdowns, but not somebody I'm really looking to start, to be honest with you. Even in like a 14-team league, like he's not even in consideration.
Yeah, I think that's fair because this is the thing. Like you said, he did run that touchdown in, but at the same time, this is also still Brock Purdy. We know he's somewhat of a legend already because, he's Mr. Irrelevant and he had a good game against Tom Brady, but they're still not going to be asking him to do more than they need him to. It's not like they're going to be putting the game on his shoulders. They have Christian McCaffrey. They have these playmakers that they can get the ball in the hands of. They don't even have to go past the line of scrimmage with the ball. They could turn around and hand it to, obviously not Brandon Aiyuk. Deebo Samuel was filling that role. But when you have the type of playmakers they have, there's no reason to put it all squarely on Brock Purdy's shoulders. So I'd be worried a little bit, not worried, but I would think a little bit that the workload isn't going to be there that you're going to see with other top-end QBs. But I know he is tempting because he had a good game last week.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Now, Alex Sandoval, what's up, dude, is asking, are you starting Walker over Fournette, Rachaad White, or Zonovan Knight? Like I said, I think Zonovan Knight I'm playing over Walker regardless. And between Fournette and Rachaad White, again, if you need a 10 to 15 point PPR floor, if that's what you want and you're cool with that, I'll play either of these two guys over Walker. I just think Walker has a little bit more upside. That's how I would play it, So if you're cool with that 10 to 15 point floor, which I think is pretty doable, for these Tampa running backs, a little bit of a tough matchup against Cincinnati. But they were able to get it done last week against the 49ers, and give you that floor that you were looking for. That's kind of how I would handle it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, the only one that I would consider maybe over Walker, like you said, is Zonovan Knight. I play for the upside, especially if I'm in the playoffs. So I would start Kenneth Walker. But with Zonovan Knight, we know what you're going to get with him. He's had I think 15 or 16 points the past few weeks, and he's a sure thing. Just because of his role in the offense.
I think so. And Master Makoda is asking, would you put Aiyuk in over Zonovan Knight? I would not. I would play Zonovan Knight over Brandon Aiyuk, even with Deebo out. Not the best matchup. The Seahawks have been solid. And I have Aiyuk in my top 30, but he's down at wide receiver 28, 29, something like that. Yeah. And we'll talk about him in a sec.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead. That's true. I was going to say about Brandon Aiyuk, but we'll talk about him further on in the episode.
Cold DePietri is asking, pick 2 in a PPR, Walker, Dobbins, Judy, or Montgomery. I'm personally playing Judy and Montgomery over Walker this week because I really like Judy's matchup. It looks like Russell Wilson's going to play too.
If Russell Wilson plays, I'd definitely be okay with Judy. It's funny that we're saying that after 1 week. where they were down 27-0, and it was a lot of garbage time points. But still, Judy looked good, and Russell Wilson looked a little bit more like Russell Wilson. And I think Montgomery's a clear pick. And of these four, we know the type of workload that he's going to be getting with Khalil Herbert still out. So I think that Montgomery's a safe pick, and Judy would be high upside, especially like you said, if Russell Wilson plays. It's close.
I
though,
think
for
Judy
me,
has a
between
higher
Judy and
floor
Walker.
too. I think Judy has a higher floor as well, especially since this is a full PPR question. So yeah,
That's true.
those are my two picks. Yeah, I think let's move on. So we talked about everybody. Obviously, starting McCaffrey. I think we talked about everyone else that's fantasy relevant in these games. Gino, you can start him. I have him as a low end. Low end RB, low end QB1 this week. Brian here is debating between him and Herbert. Definitely going Herbert, dude. Between Gino and him. So yeah, Herbert's okay. I have him one spot above Mike White, and I would be tempted to play Mike White over Gino, but I think Gino can still get it done because there are some matchup advantages that he could take advantage of, and we'll talk about that when we get to Metcalf and Lockett.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's it. Let's go ahead and get right into the rankings. Let's do it. Okay, so at number 1. Justin Jefferson against Indianapolis. Stephon Gilmore, hasn't really been shut down or anything this season. A few number 1 wide receivers have done relatively well against the Colts this year, especially lately. CeeDee wasn't really needed, right? After Dallas blew out Indy, so he could have had a bigger game if they really wanted him to. Still, he went for 5 for 71 and a touchdown against Dallas. Devontae Adams had a huge game against them in Week 10. Terry McLaurin in Week 9. Jefferson is Jefferson. He's going to be in line to have a very solid game this week. And then Devontae Adams at 2 against New England. Jamar Chase at 3 against Tampa. It's possible that he's their only real healthy wide receiver. And it's funny because this is the complete opposite just a few weeks ago where he was the least healthy. But this is a very solid matchup against Tampa. He had a 50% target share last week with Higgins and Boyd banged up. So, I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes as the overall wide receiver 1 this week if these other 2 guys are still banged up.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. Jamar Chase is Jamar Chase. And, for some receivers, you might say, oh, well, he's going to be drawing the top coverage and they're going to be able to shut him down. I think they'll definitely do their best, to kind of, they could actually have an opportunity to double team him this week and do what they need to do instead of leaving him out on an island because the competition at wide receiver outside of that is Trent Irwin and Trent Taylor, the 2 Trents. So people that you probably haven't even heard of, you're definitely not starting in your lineup. But Jamar Chase, I still think he has that potential, like you said, to finish as wide receiver 1 because his connection with Joe Burrow is just off the charts. We saw it last week, like you said, with that high target share. Devontae Adams, he's been on and off. Obviously he had that stretch of games before this last game where he was quiet, where he did very well. But Derek Carr does this thing where just sometimes he doesn't look his way. He doesn't target Devontae Adams the way he should, in a game. He had 6 targets last week. He caught 3 of them. All 3 of the catches were pretty good. You saw the one, obviously, where Jalen Ramsey had his eyes covered. I don't know what you're doing not throwing to Devontae Adams, but he should still be up here at 2. I think Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson, like you said. So he'll be at 1. Devontae Adams, I think either of these guys are liable to finish at the top.
The Devontae Adams thing, it seems like an outlier game. He had literally 1, 2, 3, 5 straight games of just balling out. So he needed one game to just settle down a little bit. Now, New England has given up a ton of fantasy points to wide receivers in terms of that number 1 wide receiver this year. They've gone off. So I have no qualms about Devontae Adams this week, kind of bouncing back to what we've been seeing. And then I got Amon-Ra at number 4 against the Jets. Not the best matchup in the world, but if you're going to beat the Jets, you'll beat them out of the slot. And that's where St. Brown runs most of his routes from. We've seen multiple slot wide receivers do their thing against the Jets this year. Christian Kirk, Jerry Jeudy, Jacoby Myers, just to name a few. And then I got A.J. Brown at 5 against Chicago. They haven't let up a ton of fantasy points to wide receivers this year. They've been especially stout on that left side where A.J. Brown runs most of his routes from. But they have let up a little bit elsewhere. I have Devontae Smith at number 23 overall this week for wide receivers. And, his matchup is better than A.J. Brown's, given the fact that he runs most of his routes from the slot and the right perimeter. However, it's A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown is capable of having a big ceiling, beating any type of coverage at any point. So he's still going to be up here at number 5.
Yeah, and it's like with these guys at the top, the matchup obviously will help you make the determinations on, how to rank them, I guess, overall. But with AJ Brown, he could finish as wide receiver one. We've seen him do it many times. Jalen Hurts is balling
Easily.
out. Yeah, this is AJ Brown we're talking about. Same with Amon-Ra St. Brown. We know what he can do. I do like that he runs his routes out of the slot, this week. I know you watch more of the Jets games than I do, but I can't say. It seems like he's going to be avoiding Sauce for the most part if he runs his routes in the slot. So that's good for him. And then that's just the thing. These top five guys, they could fall in any order. They're all very talented. We saw AJ Brown. There was 0.0 yards of separation on that one catch against the Titans, and he still caught it. It's like
100%.
it doesn't matter the matchup. These guys are just going to get it done for you each week. If they have a quiet week, you just kind of put it past you, and you look forward to the next week with these guys.
Yeah, and Amon-Ra, like he runs most of his routes from the slot, but like he still runs like a solid like 40 to 45% of his routes like on the outside. They do bunch these guys up a little bit, which is nice. That's what you want to see. Kind of similar to how the Rams do it. So he can still get it done, but just keep in mind that he will be going up against Sauce, and DJ Reed, at times in this game. So maybe the ceiling isn't as high, but he's still somebody who can easily put up like 9 catches for 120 and a touchdown. It can happen this week too.
That's
I have
like
CeeDee Lamb and
stat line we always predict for Amon-Ra St. Brown.
pretty much
8 to 10 catch range, like low to mid 100 yards and then a touchdown seems to come along. It doesn't matter. Like you could talk about touchdown percent whether he scores a lot of touchdowns or not. He does score a lot of touchdowns, but like he's catching so many passes, you got to think at least one of them every week is going to be a touchdown.
Exactly. And he's been stopped short of the goal line so many times this year.
Yeah,
at the
and that's
1 yard line. That's
part of why Jamal Williams has just been a touchdown machine.
Exactly. I got CeeDee Lamb at 6 against Jacksonville. He's been running 60% of his routes from the slot this season, and Jacksonville has been especially bad against slot wide receivers. They've given up the second most fantasy points to them over the last 8 weeks. Do you expect this to be a little bit more of a competitive game? This game is in Jacksonville this week.
It'll be a competitive game, and I just have this feeling. I'm not saying it's because like, oh, well, Dallas struggled against Houston, so they're going to struggle against Jacksonville. It's a week-to-week league. Obviously these things happen. I think Dallas is a better team. I think they'll pull away eventually and win. I think it'll be comfortable, like a 10-point margin. But I think for part of the game, it'll be competitive enough that Dallas is going to be throwing the ball. This Jaguars offense is not anything to sneeze at. They can do what they need to do. They have playmakers on defense. I think that this should be a close enough game that you don't have to worry about CeeDee Lamb, just being phased out by the second half. I think they're going to actually look to get him a little bit more involved after he was only targeted a couple times last week. He didn't do a whole lot. And obviously that was a tough matchup against the Texans from a fantasy perspective. But Dak has been turning the ball over. This is like the one spot. This is what Dallas needs. They need to tune up for the matchup against the Eagles. And that's what everyone talks about, the Cowboys looking past this game. But I think they can use this game to, get that final tune up, get Dak back in a rhythm. And if he gets back in a rhythm, CeeDee Lamb should be doing his thing because CeeDee Lamb has been targeted heavily. He was targeted a lot before this last week where he was just quiet. So I think he'll get back on track. And I think having him at 6 makes sense.
I got Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill at 8 in what looks like a snow game in Buffalo. The weather might suck. And if the weather does suck, like, where do we cross the line? Like, where do we put that line of demarcation of like, okay, I'm going to start these guys over Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill. I already have Jaylen Waddle pretty low this week. But
that's not just because of the weather though.
Yeah. Agreed. Now, here's the thing. Like, if we know the weather's going to suck, right? Like, you got studs in guys like Garrett Wilson, Keenan Allen, Christian Watson. I have these guys at 9, 10, and 11. Like, do we keep Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill here? Or, like, are you playing the guys that I just mentioned over these 2 snow game guys?
I'm leaving Stephon Diggs, up above them. This is the Bills. Obviously they're used to playing in the cold. And I like the quarterback situation for Stephon Diggs a lot more. I think the Bills are going to do much better in this game than the Dolphins are. Not a shot at Tyreek Hill, but just Tua has not looked as good as he did at the beginning of the season. Obviously, he's on a bit of a cold streak. And to go into a cold stadium on a cold streak, it just doesn't sound good. It might be a little bit of a frostbite there for Tua, and he might not do a whole lot this week. So I think I would leave Stephon Diggs at 7. I would consider Keenan Allen. I would consider Garrett Wilson. And I would maybe even consider Christian Watson, like you said. over Tyreek Hill. And it would be a consideration that I have. You know, you don't want to bench Tyreek Hill. It feels weird.
No, it feels
I
so
don't
weird.
think, yeah, I don't think you want to bench Tyreek Hill, but I will say that there might be merit in having a discussion with yourself or just making a decision that maybe, like, even a guy like Christian Watson, we've seen the upside that he has. He seems to be locked in for touchdowns. Maybe you just start him because he might not, even if he doesn't have as big a day as Tyreek Hill does, if Tyreek Hill is a big day, you're not going to be hurting that much. It might be a 5-point difference. So I would have that conversation. Any of those guys you could justify. So I'd be okay starting any of them over Tyreek Hill, but the default for me would be Tyreek Hill. It would take, I'm not sure what it would take eventually to put me over the top, but it would be the snow. I want to see, it's only 7 inches. So I think that it might not be that bad. It's not 7 inches falling during game time. You know, they're calling for 7 inches of snow. So it might just be a regular snow. And we've seen players get through that just fine. So for now, I'm starting Tyreek Hill over those guys, but you could definitely justify Wilson, Allen, or Watson over him.
And then, like have Christian Watson at 11 against the Rams, which is a great matchup, right? He lines up all over the place, and it just so happens that the Rams have sucked everywhere, regardless of where wide receivers are lining up. They're bottom 10 in fantasy points given up from both perimeter spots, left and right, and the slot as well, over the last 8 weeks and the last 4 weeks. And Keenan Allen, I have him at 10. Tennessee is a lot more vulnerable to perimeter wide receivers, but I still expect Justin Herbert to focus in on Keenan Allen. He's at 28% target share or more in 3 of his last 4 games. We saw Christian Kirk had a quiet game against Tennessee last week out of the slot, as I expected. But Keenan Allen, he's different, right? I think he can overcome it, and I think he's going to get the target share regardless.
Yeah, I love Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen. I don't really care what the matchup is. Justin Herbert, like I always say, I said this, I don't know how many times I've said this on the podcast. Justin Herbert is a different quarterback when Keenan Allen plays, and that bodes well for both of them. So I think Keenan Allen, you could definitely have him. I think this might be a little bit conservative of a ranking. Against Tennessee, they're not a very good defense. In terms of the pass game, they've let up some big games for wide receiver ones. That's what Keenan Allen is. They have their full complement of weapons. They're going to be spread pretty thin in that secondary, dealing with all these weapons. Josh Palmer's even emerged as, a pretty good weapon for the Chargers. So I think that Keenan Allen can get it done, absolutely.
Casio Uchiha, appreciate the super chat. And we're getting into DK Metcalf right now, and you're going to find out why I like DK Metcalf more than Jaylen Waddle. So we're going DK over Waddle this week. And then between Goff and Mike White, I think both of us are going Mike White, right?
Yeah, if it weren't for the Jets being Goff matchup, I would say Goff, because it's just, I like the offense for the Lions more, just a little bit more than the Jets, but
of course,
the Jets defense. So they're going to have a couple of their receivers locked up. If it's not going on Ross St. Brown, I don't know who it's going to be going to. We've seen Goff kind of struggle against good defenses. He's played 2 really good matchups these past few weeks, and he's capitalized, so he does look good. But I think that White is the way to go here too. Yeah,
he struggled against pressure. He hasn't thrown many touchdowns in away games, and this is a really good defense. So I'm staying away from Goff if I can this week. All right. So let's see. Who do I have? Okay. Now, despite this tough matchup and what this looks like a tough matchup against San Francisco, I have the dynamic duo of Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf at 12 and 13. They're going to forever move together. The 49ers, they have been a little vulnerable in their secondary lately, especially on the right side and the slot, right? We've been talking about the slot the whole time, but the right side has kind of opened up a little bit as well. And that's why I'm putting Tyler Lockett ahead of DK Metcalf this week, because of the fact that his matchup out of the slot and the right perimeter, where he runs most of his routes from, is better than DK's, who runs most of his routes on that left perimeter. So it's been 6 games in a row now with a Lockett touchdown. It's been 2 games in a row for Metcalf. This is one of the reasons why I'm not necessarily benching Geno Smith, because both these guys can still go off.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it either. I think it makes sense to have Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf here. Both of them pretty much borderline wide receiver ones. And I think that makes sense. Take away the matchup against Miami, right? And even then, Tyreek Hill got it done for the 49ers defense, I should say. Take away that matchup. These are the offenses that the 49ers defense have played. And the 49ers defense is very talented and they're very good. But just listen to this. They play Tampa Bay. Is the Tampa Bay offense anything to be scared of, really, at this point?
No.
Okay, how about New Orleans with Andy Dalton? They got shut out. Is that really a high-end offense? No.
Nope.
Arizona with Colt McCoy.
Nope.
No. The Chargers. They were missing Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, I think, in week 10, right?
Agreed.
These are the teams they've played. They may not have faced an offense with the star power in a few weeks like the Seahawks have tonight. So I think you could get away with starting these guys. The 49ers defense is good, but I don't think they've been tested in a little while. So we might see them struggle a little bit tonight. I think this makes sense to have them at 12 and 13.
Love it. Love it. I got Chris Godwin at 14 against Cincinnati. We know his target share will be there. Christian Kirk against Dallas at 15. Chris Olave against Atlanta at 16. Atlanta has been low-key impressive lately. They've given up the least amount of fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers over the last 4 weeks, and they've been getting better like as the season has progressed in that department. I still like Olave this week, but I initially thought that he was going to be a bit higher in my rankings this week until I started to look at the numbers and started doing a little bit of research for this week. I was like, oh, okay. Like I still like him. Obviously he's at 16, which is higher than he's been at lately.
Yeah.
But I think he can still get it done against this Atlanta secondary.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a turnaround for Atlanta secondary. At the beginning of the season, AJ Terrell was getting picked on a little bit, but he seems like he's locked it down a little bit more these past few weeks. He's looked better. And the Saints are coming off a bye, so, we'll see how that goes. Right? They're coming off a bye?
The Saints are, yes.
Yeah, they're coming off a bye. Sorry, I just thought for a second that I was saying crap. So they are coming off a bye. Yeah. So Chris Olave, we haven't seen him in a little bit. It feels like we've been a little bit detached from him. The weeks before, 2 weeks ago, we had him ranked as a what? Was it a low-end wide receiver 2? Maybe a high-end wide receiver 3?
Something like that. Yeah, borderline wide receiver 2. Yeah.
So this is a little bit higher than we have had him. It's true, but I think that they can get it done. This is going to be them playing against, a rookie quarterback. We'll see how this offense goes. They've been quiet these past few weeks. Hopefully some adjustments come in and Chris Olave could get some more targets than he's had in the past few weeks. He hasn't been bad, but he hasn't been consistent enough to be started at this type of level where we have him ranked. But I think he can get back to that this week.
I have DeAndre Hopkins here at 17 in a tough matchup against Denver. And, it's that and the fact that Kyler Murray is out. That makes him a wide receiver 2 at best.
Yeah.
And, hopefully this doesn't turn bad for Colt McCoy this week because it could turn bad against his Denver defense. It's possible. And then at 18, I have Jerry Jeudy in a great matchup against Arizona. They've given up the third most fantasy points to slot wide receivers, and he's coming off a 3-touchdown game. I got Mike Williams at 19 against Tennessee. This is a great matchup on the outside for him. He returned to a near full-time role last week. He didn't come back to like a absolute full route participation. I'm expecting that to go up this week. He didn't leave the game with anything aggravated. That high ankle sprain seemed to be intact. So the ankle itself seems to be intact.
Yeah,
which is good news. So hopefully he'll come back in this game and have a big week.
That's the bar that he's been needing to clear these past few weeks, and just pretty much this whole season. He's been in and out of the lineup a little bit, but Mike Williams, when he's on the field, especially with Keenan Allen there, obviously we got a look at him for like 2 or 3 plays the other week on Sunday Night Football, right? That was against or whoever it was, but Josh Palmer had that big game. He was on the field for one game, caught one pass, and he was out. But we saw it last week. What they can do.
Oh, you're talking about the Chiefs game. The Chiefs game when Mike Williams. Yeah. Right,
mm-hmm.
Right.
So we saw the full complement for 3 plays before last week. And it looks really good. Mike Williams, I'm not worried about him. I do think Keenan Allen has a safer floor because we talked about his target share it's going to be higher. That's the way it's going to be. Justin Herbert has a good connection with Keenan Allen, and it's not to say his connection with Mike Williams is bad either. But Mike Williams is more of the big play threat. And you really play him for upside. This is why you have him ranked here. It's a little bit conservative. I think that this ceiling far outweighs where we have him ranked right now. But, you're just not sure. Like you said, that route participation has to go up. If it goes back up to that full route participation, do you think we'll be having him ranked more towards the top 15 like we had him earlier in the season?
It depends because we need more of a sample size of what this target share looks like with both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams on the field at the same time, right? We had him much higher when he was healthy, but, that was without Keenan Allen. So with Keenan Allen now, the targets might go down and he might become a little bit more touchdown dependent like he was last week.
You have to figure, though, with Justin Herbert at quarterback, that he could easily support 2 wide receiver 1s in a week, I think.
Agreed. But tell that to Mike Williams managers over the last two seasons. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like we have a huge sample size of Mike Williams being completely up and down, completely boom bust, when Keenan Allen's on the field.
Yeah,
and that's my only concern.
Keenan Allen's just like the solid thing.
This week, though, I like Mike Williams' matchup more than Keenan Allen's, but I would still expect Keenan Allen to get most of the targets.
Right.
But I think, on the outside, we talked about it. Tennessee's defense is not good. So they can definitely get it done. We saw, these wide receivers on the outside last week do their thing. So let's see. I really like Michael Pittman this week against Minnesota. He runs most of his perimeter routes on the left side, and Minnesota has given up the most fantasy points to wide receivers who line up on the left perimeter over the last 8 weeks. And we saw last week DJ Shark on that left side against Minnesota getting that long touchdown, right? Paris Campbell has the next best matchup out of the slot between him and Alec Pierce, if you're trying to figure out between those two. So it's really that left side and the slot where they've been vulnerable, and Pittman runs a combined 65% of his routes from those two spots. So I'm expecting a good game from him on Sunday.
Yeah, and for me, it comes down to, who are they playing? Minnesota? Okay, start him. Obviously this defense has just been bad against the pass. And Michael Pittman, he's been pretty quiet the past few weeks, but I think that he can get things done, obviously in a plus matchup this week. He hasn't had good matchups for a couple of weeks, I don't think, right? I think he's had a pretty tough stretch. Yeah.
And he's had tough matchups.
They're coming off bye. They should have had a chance to adjust. We'll see how this stretch of games goes at the end for Jeff Saturday. We'll see what kind of adjustments he makes, and whether he might be able to hold on to that job might come down to how this team performs. And Michael Pittman would have to be a big part of that for them to be scoring and keeping up with Minnesota. So I think they're definitely capable of doing it. We just have to see it happen.
I have no idea if T. Higgins is playing this week, right? He's been limited.
Yeah, I don't either.
Let's see what his practice reports are for the rest of the week. If he gets a full practice, I think I'll be moving him up to maybe ahead of Chris Godwin, maybe at 14, something around there. But for now, assuming that he's going to be limited all week, I'm not going to trust him, especially over a lot of these guys. So I'm drawing the line here and leaving him at 21 for now, ahead of Terry McLaurin. Yeah. Now, if he has full practices, let's say he gets full practice today. Today's Thursday, and then he gets another full practice tomorrow on Friday. Are you a lot more confident in Higgins this weekend?
Yeah, if he gets a full practice, definitely. I mean, of course, I'd be confident at that point. But it's just limited that limited tag that makes you, of course, hesitant to put him any higher than we have him at 21. And it feels weird having him at 21.
Especially after this past Sunday. What happened?
Yeah, 100%. That it came out of the blue. It's like one of those trust breakers immediately. You're not sure what you're going to get with him. But he did practice today, I think. Sleeper has a report out. It doesn't say whether it was limited or full, but he did practice again today.
Yeah, so we'll get that practice report a little bit later.
Yeah, I guess you could say it's a good thing. I don't know if he's going to play. I hope he plays. But if he doesn't, Jamar Chase, it's not whether he plays or not, you're not going to affect Jamar Chase. The only thing that would be affected by T. Higgins playing would be T. Higgins. So I think that you can start him if he does play. That's what I would do. I think that having him at 21 kind of takes into account. It's baked in, the risk that you have with him. But I think his upside is pretty high, just as long as he plays.
100%.
That's all you need to rely on.
Even if he gets a full practice on Friday, I'll move him up about 6-7 spots, I would say. McLaurin had a good game against the Giants before the bye. I have him at 22. He went 8 for 105 and a touchdown. That was his best fantasy output of the season. And we talked about how good of a matchup that was for him, before that game in week 13, I think it was.
Yes.
So, fire him up as a low-end wide receiver 2 this week. Devontae Smith at 23, solid matchup like I talked about before. Just keep in mind this might be a Miles Sanders game. Juju at 24 against Houston, not the best matchup in the world, but he still got it done last week against Denver. So, if he can get it done against Denver, he can potentially get it done against Houston too.
It is Patrick Mahomes too. And obviously quarterback is like, I guess you could say maybe Patrick Mahomes is matchup proof, but this season, the Texas defense has been pretty good against receivers and quarterbacks. The run game is where they've been, blown up. And we've seen that week in, week out. Juju Smith-Schuster had a good matchup, like you said, against Denver last week. So I think that they're definitely capable of getting it done, but I'm still tempering expectations with him, especially with guys like Devontae Smith, like you said, up above him. Terry McLaurin, I think this could be, a repeat matchup of what we saw in week 13, like you said, because not much has changed with the Giants. And obviously Terry McLaurin and the Commanders have been on bye. So it's going to be pretty much just a grudge match of doing it again. I can see Terry McLaurin doing his thing. This feels a little bit maybe low. I think Terry McLaurin's upside is much higher than 22. Excuse me.
I think I'm going to play Josh Palmer over Juju, actually. Juju, he's going up against Desmond King, and that kind of worries me just a little bit. I really like Josh Palmer this week. He had a relatively quiet game last week, but like I said before, I really like this matchup on the outside against Tennessee. The Titans are giving up the most fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers over the last 4 weeks and the second most over the last 8 weeks. And even though Mike Williams was back last week, Palmer ran a route on 81% of dropbacks, and he ran routes from the perimeter at a 70% rate. So I'm firing him up this week. I understand Mike Williams is back, but I think Josh Palmer has a high ceiling, and I think he has a good game this week.
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible. Even with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen in the lineup, he still got 6 targets last week. And he's still he's a big play threat. He kind of took over that role for Mike Williams in this couple of weeks where he was out with Keenan Allen, back in the fold. So I wouldn't count Josh Palmer out. I think any of these guys are liable to go off. It's funny. We've seen Josh Palmer do this before too. It's not just this season. He's been around and he's been doing his thing. So if Mike Williams is quiet or if he's limited at all, we'll see if he gets back up to that route participation, obviously when they play. But if he's limited at all, Josh Palmer could be the beneficiary here. All it takes is him to get a couple targets like he has gotten, and he can do plenty with it. It's just he happens to be buried behind 2 very good talents in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams.
I got Jaylen Waddle at 26. This is just, it's hard to trust, in that rough weather game in Buffalo. And on top of that, like you mentioned earlier, right? It's not just because of that. He hasn't really shown that ceiling lately. Right. So I'm okay trying to find alternatives for him. That's why I have him down here as like a high wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have him. I think this is a floor ranking. Obviously, he's been super quiet, but we've seen when Tua's in trouble, he isn't really looking for Jaylen Waddle. He's looking for Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is definitely, I think, still the better receiver overall. He's just different. Jaylen Waddle is very fast too, but he's just not on the level of Tyreek Hill. And just the way that we've seen Tua play recently, like I said, if he's going to look for someone when he's in trouble, which he has been the past few weeks, it's been Tyreek Hill. You can't really trust Jaylen Waddle, especially with the weather, the way it's going to be. Like I said, I see the Dolphins going out and just flopping around, on the snow. That's what's going to happen. I don't think it'll be a very good game offensively for them. I think it's going to be pretty frustrating for them. It's a Saturday night game, right? Yeah, it's Saturday. I think
so.
Game.
Yeah.
I could see them just going out flopping around and just having a rough go of it in the snow. So, like I said, part of that is also because, they're a warm weather team. They play down in Miami, so they're used to the warm weather. Did you see Mike McDaniels wearing a shirt at practice that says, "I wish it was colder," or something like that? That's going to look hilarious because, like I said, I don't see a very good outing for this team. Offensively this week. Jaylen Waddle, I think it seems a little drastic to have him at 26, but this could very well be where he finishes. I think this is right about where it's well within his range of finishes where you're not going to say, oh, it's an outlier if he finishes at 26.
I got Amari Cooper at 27, and this might be way too low. Baltimore has actually allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers over the last 4 weeks, so they kind of regress a little bit. But, we just haven't seen that Cooper-Watson connection yet, right? That's my only concern. Like, it's going to hit at some point because I think Deshaun's a good quarterback. Amari Cooper's obviously a very good wide receiver. I just don't know when it's going to happen. And I think if you need to chase a ceiling, I think Cooper is a good ceiling chaser play this week because we know he has that ceiling in him. I would call him a boom-bust play. Like, that's what he is right now.
Yeah, that's what he is right now, and that's it. He's been a floor play. Not even a floor play. He's just been hitting the floor, a couple times these past few weeks since Deshaun Watson has come back. I've soured a lot on Amari Cooper. I was very big on Amari Cooper, earlier in the season with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, and I was talking about it like, oh, Deshaun Watson can come back. It's going to be better. No, Donovan Peoples-Jones looks like he's the guy right now.
He had a career game last week.
Yeah, so I don't think you don't want to undervalue that because if Deshaun Watson is going to come in and who does it look like he has a connection with most right now is Donovan Peoples-Jones. You can't undervalue that. Amari Cooper is a better receiver, I think, and I think it's not very close. Amari Cooper is a much better receiver than Donovan Peoples-Jones, but until Deshaun Watson starts clicking with him, it's just not going to be a very good season for Amari Cooper. And I think that this season, it might be a little over dramatic to say it, but I think that we might have seen the best of Amari Cooper this season. And
Don't say
he
it.
might,
Say it
he
ain't
might,
so, Zach.
yeah, well, say it ain't so. I wish this wasn't the case, but I think it might take until next season. It might take a whole offseason before they start showing any type of connection and fantasy relevance for Amari Cooper. So I'm not shutting him down. I'm still starting him if I have him, but I'm not going in with high expectations the rest of the way.
I hear you. And I have Donovan Peoples-Jones down here at 30. So I am playing Cooper above DPJ, but maybe DPJ has a higher floor than Amari at this point. But yeah, I'm still playing Amari Cooper over him barely. I got Brandon Aiyuk at 28 against Seattle. I don't know if I trust Brock Purdy to get it to Aiyuk, especially against the defense.
I don't.
Giving up the third least fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. They're just stout against wide receivers. And, even with Debo out, I don't know if Aiyuk has that much of a ceiling this week.
No. And I said, I don't trust him to get the ball to Aiyuk either, even with Debo out. And even with that touchdown pass that Purdy had to Brandon Aiyuk last week, all of his production came on that play pretty much. Outside of that, he had 3 targets. He had 2 catches. Brock Purdy's not looking for him. And why would you when you have a guy like Christian McCaffrey in the backfield who you can throw to 10 times a game and just hand the ball off to many times a day?
Christian McCaffrey might get 30 touches tonight.
Yeah.
I can see
it. It's very possible. So with Brandon Aiyuk, Jimmy Garoppolo, we saw this early in the season. He started looking Brandon Aiyuk's way, and then he didn't stop. He had a high target share the few weeks before this, but now he's back down, and it's come down to the quarterback changes that really have dictated Aiyuk's performance, and things aren't looking good. And like you said, the matchup isn't anything to behold either. So I would say you could get away with benching Brandon Aiyuk this week. I'd be surprised if he has a good night.
There you go. I got Marquise Brown at 29 and Diamond Peoples-Jones, like I said, at 30. If you want the rest of the wide receiver rankings, you can check out our Patreon page. It's linked in the description of wherever you're watching or listening. But we'll have that up later today before Thursday Night Football. And we'll also have the rest of the positions and flex rankings as well up there. Yeah. All right. Let's move to tight ends. Kelsey at number 1. Mark Andrews at number 2, with Tyler Huntley, by the way, practicing in full so far this week. On Wednesday, he practiced in full. So that's a great sign that he's going to be good to play. Dalton Schultz at 3, 2 games in a row at full route participation. That's awesome. That's what you want to see. Great matchup as well. TJ Hawkinson at 4, George Kittle tonight at 5 in a great matchup. Hopefully Purdy can find him. But I'm looking at David Njoku at 6 against Baltimore. He was back last week with 90% route participation. That was awesome to see. There's definitely an argument for Njoku over Kittle. You think we should make that change?
Yeah, I think we do. I think it's warranted because we saw we just talked about Donovan Peoples-Jones and Amari Cooper. Deshaun Watson was looking for Donovan Peoples-Jones, but David Njoku's also getting looks in the passing game. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't he out target Amari Cooper? Is that true?
He did.
Yeah. So who could blame him? David Njoku is just a freak. But I think that having him at 5 over George Kittle with a quarterback situation, it's Brock Purdy, and obviously we hope he does well, but there's no guarantee. This is his second career start. I think it makes sense to put David Njoku over him at 5.
Amari Cooper seems to me like a great tournament GPP DFS play this week.
Yeah,
he really does. He can put up 2 touchdowns pretty easily. In terms of his ceiling is going to be there regardless. Anyway. Yeah, it seems like people are going to be off of him this week. Yeah. All right, let's see.
Especially if they listen to this podcast.
Yeah, I know, right? Okay, let's go contrarian. Let's go Amari Cooper. Gerald Everett in a good matchup against Tennessee at 7, followed by Greg Dulcich at 8 in a great matchup against Arizona. It seems like Russell Wilson is progressing through the protocol in a way that he will play this week. Just monitor that, though. I have Okonkwo at 9 because Treylon Burks is not progressing the way that we'd want him to in order for him to play this week. So it looks like Burks might not play. So if that's the case, Okonkwo, again, even though he's sharing that route participation with Hooper, it looks like they're targeting him. He looks like a freak though, and he's gonna produce if he's getting looks.
I'm okay with starting Okonkwo. I think even if Treylon Burks plays, because he looks like a dynamic, receiving player. And a Titans offense that needs that type of player. I mean, obviously Treylon Burks, if he plays, they have 1. But if you can get 2 with Chigozie Okonkwo there, I think he's worlds better in terms of his talent than Austin Hooper. There's not really anybody else that scares me to take away the targets. They've been looking his way these past few weeks. I think he's carved himself out a role that's going to continue regardless of whether Treylon Burks plays or not. It's for me, with the way the tight end landscape is and the talent that Chigozie Okonkwo has, I think regardless of whether Treylon Burks plays or not, I'm starting him for the upside.
I'm with you. I got Brad Freiermuth at 10, man. He has a foot injury apparently now, and his route participation has been around 50% each of the last 2 weeks. It's not what you want to see, man. It's not what you want to see.
No.
And with the quarterback issues, I don't know what the quarterback situation is going to look like. Freiermuth is a decent start. The matchup is okay, but he's a tight end one. That's pretty much it. That's how I would leave it at this point.
Because we're entering crapshoot range now.
Yeah,
here going at 10, 11.
If Freiermuth's route participation was what it was before the last 2 weeks, sure, start him as a top 6, 7 tight end, but not right now. Cole Kmet at 11 against Philly, he would be higher if this wasn't such a tough matchup for tight ends. Same thing with Evan Ingram, right? He had a sick day last week, but he was the tight end 30 something, and then he went all the way up to the tight end 3 on the year or something crazy like that with that one game. But Dallas is also one of the toughest matchup for tight ends. So you gotta make sure that you don't overvalue what he did last week against the Lions.
Dallas' defense is tough. I'll give you that. But I think that if anybody's going to have success against the Cowboys, it would be the receivers. So I think having him here at 12, a lot of people are probably going to be like, but for us, he had 40 points last week, and Trevor Lawrence looks good. No, I think you kind of have to temper expectations with him this week. I don't think it's going to be a high scoring game, but I don't think it's going to be a low scoring game either. Evan Ingram, it was a high scoring game last week. He scored 2 touchdowns. I'm not expecting anything really close to that. I wouldn't be surprised if he went 7 for 50 this week, right back where he kind of settled the weeks prior.
And then I got Tyler Conklin at 13 against Detroit. Decent matchup there. Tyler Higbee, who was back to a near full route participation last week, just didn't get the targets. Hunter Henry against Vegas. Keep in mind, look at whether Jacoby Myers is going to play or not, but this is a decent matchup for him. Foster Moreau, I have him at 16 here. There is a possibility that Darren Waller is back this week. So if Darren Waller is back, obviously don't play Foster Moreau. If he's back, I wouldn't even rank Waller that high, to be honest with you.
I would
probably end up putting Waller ahead of Tyler Conklin. That's kind of where I'm at with Waller. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes all the sense in the world. I've been a frequent Waller drafter the past few seasons. And even when Waller plays, Foster Moreau gets on the field. And Darren Waller's no sure thing anymore. He had that one season where he was excellent, but now he's just kind of fallen off. He's not very consistent at all. We haven't seen much of a sample size at all with him having Devontae Adams on the field. Obviously, he's able to get it done the first 2 weeks, but then he kind of quieted it down. I'm not sure if I would consider starting Darren Waller until we know he's for sure healthy, because he's probably going to come back and be limited in some fashion this week if he does play. So I would just kind of leave him on the bench for now, and maybe you throw him in next week if you need the upside at the tight end position, because there's not much else outside of the top guys like we talk about.
Jordan in the chat, Foster Moreau did put up that donut last week, so Foster Zero. I like it.
Yeah.
Dawson Knox at 17. I know he had a couple decent games, but they're going up against Miami in that what seems like a bad weather game. I still don't trust Knox that much. Austin Hooper had a decent week last week, and he's getting targeted as well. With Treylon Burks potentially out again, he becomes in streaming consideration. I might actually play Austin Hooper over Foster Moreau. So if you move him up a little bit, maybe to 16, something like that. And then Taysom Hill at 19, Noah Fant at 20. And that's going to do it. Anything else with these last tight ends, or are we all set?
Just Taysom Hill making an appearance again, just because we know what he can do, because he's not used in a tight end fashion.
They're coming out the bye. They could put a few wrinkles in there, had some extra time to put some wrinkles in there. That's all.
I think you could get away with playing him just because of that. Any week, if you don't have one of the top guys, Taysom Hill is just a dart throw every single week, and he could, put up 20 points, because sometimes it's just a Taysom Hill day, and I might take my chances on that over a guy like Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox, yes, he'll be running some routes, but Taysom Hill has much more unique usage and a higher upside than Dawson Knox at this point.
Jordan is on fire today. How about Driscoll? He's asking. It's a good point. On some platforms, not Sleeper, Jeff Driscoll is listed as a tight end. He's dual eligible as a quarterback and a tight end. So yes, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to be there. I would say.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't have one of these top guys, I would say, you know, after Tyler Conklin, I think that's where I would put him, somewhere around there. Because we don't know what it's going to look like. Driscoll only came in in specific situations.
Right.
So that's kind of how I would play it.
This
Daniel
was
Keenan
the
is
first week.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, this was the first week with Jeff Driscoll where we actually saw him used. I was infuriated because, like I said, I'm a Cowboys fan, and boy, I would have been mad if we lost to the platoon quarterback situation of Jeff Driscoll and Davis Mills. They used him pretty much as a rusher. It was like the Taysom Hill role. So I guess yes, you could say something like that. He did throw a touchdown, but before this, we hadn't seen him much on field. I'm not sure if they employ that again.
Juwan Johnson seems to be back. He did return to practice yesterday. So good call, Daniel. If he is back, I would put Juwan Johnson above. I would say put him above Tyler Conklin, somewhere around there, between maybe right after Conklin, 13, 14-ish. That's where I'll put
Conklin
Juwan
seems
Johnson.
to be that border that you keep
Exactly.
hitting. You know what I'm saying?
Say so. Yeah, exactly. All right, that'll do it, guys. Appreciate you. Good luck tonight. Fantasy football playoffs officially starting tonight. Good luck. You know, hope you guys get, you know, whoever your players are, hope they kill it throughout this weekend. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing our Q&A, fantasy Q&A. So if you have any questions, make sure to join the podcast. I think we're going to do it at 9 a.m. tomorrow, Eastern time. So that might be a little early for a lot of people. But we're going to see. I got a couple sick kids at home. Yeah. So I have no idea what it's going to look like tomorrow. But I'll keep you guys updated on my Instagram story. But we should have a podcast tomorrow. Maybe we'll do some underdog stuff. And yeah, like answer some last minute questions. Sounds good, everybody. Thanks for listening. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys. And we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.